Hi. Today, I'd like to take a deep dive into the Elektron LFOs. Now, wait before you click away. This is going to be interesting. I mostly wanted to make this video because there's a couple settings on the LFO menu on Digitone and Digitakt that I never quite understood, and I wanted to figure them out. And I thought that would be great information to share with you because you may not fully understand how these work either. Now, the Digitone and Digitakt LFO menus have changed a bit over the years, with the current iteration has been around for quite a while and it's very full-featured now. I think previously both LFOs were on a single row and it wasn't quite as deep of options available here. But I've never used that version, so here we are. Now these boxes have 2 LFOs per track, and the Digitakt 2 now has a third LFO. Hopefully Digitone 2 will also grow an extra one. So why should you care about LFOs? I mean, that should be extremely obvious if you're already into synths, but if you're new here, that's okay. We can go step by step. An LFO, or low frequency oscillator, it's the essential modulation tool in almost all sound synthesis. As a human, you only have up to 2 hands to turn the knobs with, and so LFOs are those extra electronic hands that can turn synth knobs for you. Of course, other modulation settings and sources exist, especially on Digitone, but those aren't our focus today. So over here on the Digitone, and we can go straight into the LFO menu. If we keep tapping on the LFO button, we'll switch between LFO 1 and LFO 2. And looking at the options here, we'll skip these first 2 for now. They manage the rate of the oscillator, but they're a little weird, and I want to keep them separated. And we'll just quickly go over these other settings first. Now, fade makes it possible to fade in or out the modulation. Turning it to the right causes the LFO to fade out over time. And turning it to the left causes the LFO to fade in. And I can quickly demonstrate that with perhaps some filter. So we have this. We turn the filter all the way down. And we can barely hear it. We go to our LFO. We can change our destination, which will be filter frequency. And if we turn that up, we can hear the filter oscillating back and forth. Now, if I turn the fade to the right, this will cause it to fade out over time. So we'll start oscillating, and it'll slowly stop. There, so that's affecting our depth and turning it back to 0. If we go the other way, this will cause it to fade in. There we go. So that increases the depth from 0 up to our setting. There we go. And that's fade. And now we have destination, which controls the setting that we're modulating. And almost every track setting is available to be modulated, except on the Digitone, anything to do with the arpeggiator for reasons that I don't know. And on LFO 2, we can also modulate all the settings of LFO 1, which can give us some interesting cross-modulation effects. The wave, unsurprisingly, defines the waveform for the LFO. We start with the usual suspects, that is a triangle, a sine, a square, and a saw. But then there are a few weirder ones. We have an exponential decay, much like an envelope, and we have a ramp, which only lasts for the first half of the cycle. And then finally, we have stepped random noise, which we can use for sample and hold and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, there's no smooth random here. And next we have SPH, which is start phase, and this lets you control the start of the wave cycle when it's triggered. And when we adjust it, we can see the waveform shift left and right. The mode setting controls how the LFO works when a note is triggered. So we start here in free running, and then we have a trigger mode, which restarts the waveform when a note is triggered. We have hold, which is a sample and hold mode, where the LFO free runs in the background, but then latches to a specific point when a note is pressed. This is most useful with the random waveform. Next we have 1, which restarts the LFO on a note trigger, and it runs for 1 cycle. This is useful for making it act like an envelope, especially in conjunction with the exponential waveform. And then half is very similar, but it only runs the LFO for the first half of its cycle. I think it's useful to point out here that the LFOs are polyphonic. That is, each note played in a chord will have its own set of LFOs affecting the voice. When we press keys at the same time, the modulation sounds synchronized, but we get some interesting phasing effects when we add notes, like so. And this becomes even more apparent in the triggered mode. And then we have depth, which controls the modulation depth for this LFO. And now back to speed and multiple. Now the defaults here are a speed of 32 and a multiplier of BPM 32. So what does that even mean? The speed setting goes from negative 64 up to positive 64, or specifically 63.99. The negative values reverse the waveform, including flipping the direction of exponential and ramp. Now, holding down the function key while turning the knob, it latches it into some interesting values. We have 8, 12, 16, 24, 32, 48, and then 64. And then the multiplier gives us some options in powers of 2, going from 1 up to 2K, and then it starts over again without a BPM setting, going from 1 to 2K. So what does all of this mean? Now, in most synthesizers, the LFO rate is either governed by a specific range of hertz, or it's synced to a BPM in various note lengths. But for whatever reason, Elektron decided to use these vague numbers that I'm sure confound almost every user out there. So let's start with speed. What do these 8, 12, 24, and 32 numbers mean? Well, I made a spreadsheet, I crunched the numbers, and I figured it out. Also, the manual has a handy chart with some key speed combinations. As you can see with the charts, when speed and mult are both at 1, the LFO will take 128 bars to complete a cycle. Things get twice as fast at each multiplier step, going from 128 bars down to a 16th. As we double the speed, the sync steps increase until we max out both speed and multiplier and get to 1/1024th. That's fast. How fast? Well, at 120 BPM, that's equal to around 512 Hertz. Definitely audio rate. And we can definitely dial into audio rate oscillations starting at around 20 Hertz. But can we do anything interesting with this audio rate modulation? I mean, that depends on your definition of interesting, and we can definitely get some nice noise effects, but the musical use is up to you. So these powers of 2 are all well and good, but I did mention the speed steps include 12, 24, and 48. Interestingly, those result in triplet note divisions, if that's useful for your work. There's no presets for dotted notes, so where are they? Well, it turns out 10.67 and multiples of that is the magic number, which gets us close enough with only 2 decimal places to play with. But oh no, you're thinking. This all sounds like terribly complicated math. How am I going to figure out all of this? Well, don't worry. To go alongside this video, I coupled together a calculator where you can put in various numbers and see what the timings are going to look like. And it looks like this. You can get to it from a link in the description below. Now I can see exactly what happens when I pick a particular speed or BPM. I can even ask for a specific cycle time and get back a speed and multiplier value which works with the current BPM, as long as it fits within the ranges that the dials give us. Finally, I wanted to circle back on the multiplier setting. You'll see half of the options here are BPM from 1 to 2K, and then the other half are just 1 through 2K. So what does this mean? Well, the BPM half corresponds to time multipliers using the current pattern BPM. And then the other half defines cycle times using a fixed 120 BPM reference, no matter what you have the pattern set to. Thus, the default 32 by 32 setting would take half a second to cycle at 60 BPM. But if you were to change that to 32 over 32, now the LFO will take 0.25 seconds. And that's all you ever wanted to know about the LFOs in your Elektron machines. If there's anything you think I missed, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.